Hey, what is going on, everybody? It is Aaron Trevino. We have a terrific guest here. We have Eric DeVelasco. He is the Director of Operations with the Zieben Group in Houston, Texas. What's going on, Eric?
Not much. Just ending the workday at the office, and I'm glad to be on the show. I think it's really incredible what you're doing. And this is a great forum for people to learn about the industry, and I'm excited to be interviewed by you.
Yeah, thank you, Eric. I appreciate it. I know, I know we had a phone call last week. We had spoke for a little bit. You obviously have a ton of knowledge. So I love to hear what's going on in your noggin with the real estate market.
Yeah, of course, of course. Yeah, so a little bit of background on myself. So I work for a small boutique real estate development company. So traditionally, we develop about one property at a time, and then on the side we do a lot of value add in the multifamily industry. We do almost exclusively affordable housing, and so it'll have some sort of mix, whether it's project-based Section 8, tax credits, anything along those lines. And then on top of it, we do deep value add. So we're looking at assets that are in receivership, off-market deals, where we're usually spending between 7.5 to 15K a door on the rehab side, and then get a nice value pop and try and refinance it through agency debt. Currently, we own roughly 1,600 units across Texas, Arkansas, and we're looking to explore into kind of the Southeast, Florida, Alabama. We really like those markets, and additionally grow our footprint out in the Houston area.
Absolutely. One word, or I guess two words that you used quite a bit there were value add. Could you kind of explain what value add is and what it means in this context?
Yeah, so when we look at value add, we try and target properties that are in good locations, but may just need some TLC, some tender loving care. These are properties that have not had capital infusions, and really the value is by adding capital, renovating the interior, spicing up the exterior so you have good curb appeal, and then increasing your rents concurrently on and cycling through and overall bringing up the property, and that is how we're going to create value. Additionally, we'll look on the expense side on ways we can trim those up, but historically speaking, most of the value creation comes on the income side, through various packages that we'll implement, and it could be anything from just an exterior paint, and a light kind of just bathroom and kitchen remodels, or all the way to full-blown interior packages where we'll do cabinetries, floorings, new granite countertops, appliance packages, full exterior paints. It really just depends on the asset class as well, and then the market and where we think we can drive the rents.
Absolutely. I know you'd used the word packages a few times. Could you kind of explain what
Yeah.
these are?
Yeah, so when we have packages, we have multiple packages. We'll have kind of a base package, and that'll just be, think of it as when you enter a unit and a unit turns vacant, it is the base that we're going to do. And that could easily just be a fresh coat of paint. It could be paint flooring. It could be resurfacing of cabinets, countertops. It could be interior lighting. It's just whatever we feel will go into the unit that will drive the most values. I mean, some markets, they lead more to high efficiencies, like high efficiency plumbing, LEDs. It'll drive your water and sewer costs, especially in a lot of these apartments, especially in affordable housing, owners and landlords cover the water and sewer. So we always include a high efficiency water package. And then we really just look at the competing properties and kind of what they're providing, and we try and provide a product that's above that, and try and kind of just garner additional rent increases there.
Absolutely. It definitely seems like that's kind of the way to go. especially like you said, when you're dealing with affordable housing, having those, that high efficiency, right?
Yeah, and I mean and then on top of it, it's part of like the mission, right? We're a very green company. We even if it's at a cost to us, we would like to do the right thing. As in the long term, it's the right thing for the environment, on top of it, it makes us feel good at night, and you got and some of the packages are there for the residents. We'll put LED lighting in all of our units, whether or not we pay the light bills. It comes at a premium, but we feel that the reduced utility bills for the residents is a value benefit to them, and makes our product more attractive.
Yeah, absolutely. Well said. Another thing you'd also mentioned was, along with that, were tax credits. Could you kind of explain what tax credits are in this context?
Yeah, so tax credits, there is a program, it's Section 42. It is the low income housing tax credits. And so these are money set aside by the federal government. And what it is you have large institutionals. I'm going to just reference like a JP Morgan, for example. They're required to invest in the communities that they operate their branches. And so they have large syndicators, groups like Hunt Capital Partners out of California and Denver, who gather all these credits, and then you apply for credit applications. There's a 4% and a 9%. 9% is usually for new development. 4% is more on a rehab side, and so this is equity and that gets put into the deal to get them done. So a lot of the rents that we end up renting at, you can't pencil in the original construction or even the rehab. So these are just like a grant from the federal government, more or less, in order to get the deal done, and provide affordable housing for those in need.
Yeah, absolutely. It definitely seems like it's a win-win, for the development company that you're with to be able to provide a good product, and for the consumer, the eventual tenant, they're happy. The government's able to improve everything, and it seems like a win-win across the board.
Yeah, and I guess there's another piece to it. On the other side, you end up having rent restrictions as well. So it allows it allows the developer to build a product without needing to charge the huge premiums, and rents to at an affordable level for the residents. And it's usually you have a 30-year period, that you have rent restrictions, and then afterwards, if you can either extend that or it can go to market rate.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, you just explained rent restrictions and being able to keep it at that 30-year term or extend it. Could you kind of explain what rent restrictions are?
Yeah, so rent restrictions are, we are only allowed to rent at a certain level, and so these are they're set out by the state agency. So, like in Texas, we deal with the TDHCA, which is Texas Department of Housing. I forget what the CA is, but so they publish what's called they publish rent levels by the median income. So you'll have the 50%, you'll have 30%, and 60%. And so what they do is they take the average median income, and they adjust it for household size. So like a one person household will have a lower threshold than maybe a 4 or a 5. And so from there, they back out a rent, and we're only allowed to charge that. So like in Houston, the TDHCA rents are, it's roughly a little over 1,000 for the twos. It's like 1,100 for the threes and 1,400 for the fours. And that's all we're allowed to charge, regardless of if a resident would pay more.
Absolutely. Kind of again, it seems like that's kind of what's benefiting, everyone across the board.
Yeah, I mean, there's a huge need for affordable housing. I mean, you look at New York, for example. I mean, you can't even get you get a closet for a couple $1,000 a month. I mean, no one can afford those rents. I mean, in Houston, where we have some of the lowest rents, I mean, most of the blue collar workers are forced to live outside of the city because they simply can't afford to live, and that's an added burden to them. They have hour-long commutes to and from, which causes them to miss family time. It's an increased expense on their cars, on their mileage. It's less time at home for them to take care of duties. I mean, it's a huge problem in the modern, in kind of today's age, and this is a way to for developers like us to provide that to them and afford, you know, a developer to make some money while also providing housing for those who need it.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's definitely, one thing to consider. I mean, given that you're living in Houston, it's a, humongous metro area, and you need to try your best to kind of accommodate people like you'd mentioned.
Of course.
So I'm just curious as well. I know you kind of explained what value add was, the tax credits, different things like that. Do you buy land and ever do ground up construction, or you're solely doing rehabs and value adds?
No, so we just completed we've completed two ground up constructions since 2012. One of them we completed back in 2014. It's called Gulf Coast Arms. The other one is called Hardy Yards Apartment Homes. It's a double Class A rated building just outside of downtown Houston. 51% of our residents are either paying between 750 to roughly $913 a month to live right on the fringe of Houston in a Class A apartment with your resort style pool. We have a dog park, a volleyball court. I mean, it truly is a magnificent project. And we're thankful that we were able to get some grant money from the city of Houston to build and then subsequently provide housing for those who need. I mean, our goal is to provide housing for, you know, the nurses, the doctors, or not the doctors, the teachers, the police department, the fire department. I mean, those are the people who, you know, they're not necessarily making money to afford a Class A property downtown, but through programs like that, we're able to provide that.
Yeah, absolutely. One thing that you touched on a few times was the different classes, class A. Could you kind of go through what the different classes would be?
Yeah, you know, it's really about amenities and kind of the amenities provided, and subsequently what trickles down into the aesthetics of the property and the rents you're able to charge. You know, Class A is going to usually be fairly new construction, built in the last 5, 10 years. Class B will usually be a little older construction, but maybe it had a renovation in the last 5, 10 years. So the bones of the property may not have the new features, or and it may not have your concierge package at the front. It may not have the valet trash or some of the other soft service level amenities, but we'll still have a pool. It'll still have some play areas for your children. And then Class C is more or less workforce housing. There's not a whole lot of it in the city. Most of it's on the outside fringes, just because the rents don't support essentially the dirt and where it's built. And that'll be, you know, so essentially your low income areas where, uh, and those are the target people who we'd want to move into the city with some of the developments we do.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's definitely interesting kind of seeing that distinction between the different classes. I'm sure it kind of makes you observe the city of Houston a little bit differently, huh?
Oh, yeah, I mean, it does. You know, you can look at an area in a geographical map and immediately know exactly, or just like the median zip code, immediately know what sort of class properties there will be. Like Southwest Houston will be almost exclusively Class C. You know, Katy now, as it's developed, will be almost exclusively Class A, and along with downtown, in some of the areas like West Chase, or even maybe in like the Northeast, like Champions, will be a Class B.
Yeah, absolutely. I know when you were giving that explanation about the other property, you were saying how it was priced at a certain dollar amount for rent. It was kind of on the fringe. Where are a lot of your other properties as well?
Yeah, so we have a couple properties in Houston. We have some property out in San Antonio. We have a property out in Nacogdoches. We're looking to close on a second one in Nacogdoches at the end of October. We have another one out in Sulphur Springs. We're looking to close on in October. It's like in the middle between, essentially it's couple hours southeast of Dallas. And then we have about 3 properties out in Little Rock. One of them we're hoping to have sold by the end of this month.
Absolutely. I guess you've probably been working on hands-on with it, but are you able to kind of see the different distinctions or maybe even similarities between the different markets?
Yeah, I mean, there's actually huge differences, like very big differences, and CoStar actually puts out really good reports. But one of the things when we entered Little Rock is we have like a no pets policy. But when we got some CoStar reports, I want to say 33% of renters are looking for dogs or cats or some sort of pets. It was the number 2 kind of research thing on CoStar outside of in-unit washer and dryers. And so when we entered that market, we made a decision to begin allowing pets, even though it comes with, higher damage costs, higher, the deposits never fully eat up damages. You have higher increased costs on your flooring. You have chewed up doors, walls, baseboards, all of that. But we just overall looked at it and said, look, if we want to compete, we need to allow pets and just call it a cost of doing business. That's one example. Nacogdoches, it's a small town of maybe 15,000 people. They don't necessarily care about the large amenities. They're really just looking for some roof over their heads, a nice pool, maybe some nice landscaping. But then you go into like downtown Houston, and it really kind of follows the classes more or less A, B, and C in your target market renters. But those are just some of the distinctions that are just very apparent.
Yeah, absolutely. I know the last time I saw you earlier this spring, you talked a bit about being in Arkansas, and you had mentioned how you were actually hands-on in that project. You were actually on site living in Arkansas, right?
Yes, yeah. So we had a 499 unit rehab project. We didn't have a project manager to run the crews, and our budget did not afford a traditional general contractor. So I was provided a plane ticket, a corporate apartment, and a couple phone numbers for contacts, and just started networking throughout all of the greater Little Rock area to locate our subcontractors. Anything ranging from a painter for the interiors and exterior painters, our flooring guys, make ready guys to do the turns. And if you're not familiar with what a turn is, that's essentially replacing faucets, doorknobs, kind of just completing that base package, lighting fixtures, anything on the inside that's not, your flooring or your painting. And so, yeah, I was up there for about 19 months, and we were able to exit the deal into permanent financing, luckily, and didn't really have too many hiccups. It was a great learning experience. I would never want to do it again, and would never wish that on anyone. But no, I mean, I firmly am a strong believer that you learn by getting thrown into the fire, and it was a tremendous learning experience.
I would
And
imagine,
I know, as we used to say in pledgeship, it was the best time I never want to have again.
man. That sounds about right. Frankly, I was fascinated by that story. Sometimes, I mean, like you mentioned, you just kind of have to get in there and start trying to figure it out.
Yeah, and you have hiccups along the ways, right? I mean, I was not an experienced project manager. I had to learn how to schedule out my subcontractors. I learned very quickly that if a contractor tells you a date, you add a week to it, at a minimum of when it's going to be completed. And so there's always something that is not budgeted for or accounted for, or you discover something that you did not anticipate or locate in your upfront due diligence. And you just have to tackle it as you come.
Yeah, absolutely. Aside from kind of dealing with the subcontractors, maybe, being on schedule, or I guess off, not on schedule, a week late, What other sort of challenges did you face, and how did you, mitigate that?
Yeah, so I would say this for anyone who is getting into the industry and is interested in doing any sort of value add or remodeling. I was blessed by learning it from my grandparents, but I would highly recommend learning Spanish. Um, that the vast majority of the labor in the South is Hispanics, and it is a lot easier to communicate with their guys, not their project managers in Spanish. And so that would be the first thing. The second thing I would always say, you need to under promise and over deliver on your schedule to your leasing staff. At the very onset, I was giving them the dates that my subcontractors gave me on, and subsequently the office staff were leasing the units to that. And we ended up losing a fair amount of leases because I was not able to produce the units on time. And so I would always say you need to, and I can't stress it enough, under promise and over deliver on your dates and your timelines to them. And then the other is just learning scheduling. You can never do enough planning up front on your scheduling, anything from bulk ordering of your materials, pre-packaging. At the beginning, we created our own kits. And our kits is essentially all the materials that would be necessary to turn a unit. By the end, we were able to find partners who were able to ship us entire kits, and that was an incredible help. But I mean, those are the big things. It's understanding scheduling and making sure that if you're given dates, you got to deliver on that.
Yeah, absolutely. It can seem, I guess, for maybe not even the average person, but just anyone who's in any sort of 9 to 5 job, scheduling your own daily life can be difficult enough, cramming everything in and doing it in a timely manner, but much less being in a completely different environment, in a different city, in a different state, doing something you've never done before. I'm just interested in how you were able to maybe lay everything out to schedule it to begin with.
Yeah, so I was blessed at the time. We had another project out in San Antonio that we're doing a renovation on. So I was sitting on the asset manager on that, and we hired a third party company to oversee the construction and manage the construction. And so I was blessed to have him as a contact, and there were many late night phone calls I had to him, picking his brain. I know you had a gentleman on, Cowboy Closer, who talked about having a coach. I can't stress enough, when you're entering something new, there is no stupid questions. Always ask questions. Never be afraid to ask and look foolish, because at the end of the day, all that matters is you're continuing to grow and better yourself as an individual, whether that be work or outside. And so I can't stress enough how important it is to surround you around people who are smarter than you, more or less, and to learn from them.
Yeah, absolutely. It definitely is important having you know, a lot of those bright minds in the same room as you. Having those people who are more experienced, who are smarter to kind of lead you and guide you and show you the way.
Yeah, and if you don't have one, there are plenty of people in the world who, especially in COVID, who are they're bored, and if you ask them, you will find great responses. I mean, people are looking to help people out. I think it's in the human nature that we want to help and see other people succeed. And so I would highly recommend, if you are interested in any sort of industry or topic, reach out to those individuals.
Yeah, absolutely. Kind of to revert back, you had mentioned how you'd use the term to turn key or turn the door, right? What was that?
Yeah, turn units.
Turn units. Yeah. Could you kind of explain what that would mean?
Yeah, so the turning a unit is, simply put, the process of having a unit move out and then upgrading it to our rent ready status. And so it starts from when the resident moves out and begins with trashing out the unit. And then depending on the package, I'm going to just use an example of a full turn, which would be, you would then have to demo out the unit, the flooring, any cabinetry, countertops, trash it out, then painting of the unit. installing the flooring, and then cabinetry, countertops, and then putting together, doors, doorknobs, bathroom fixtures, lighting fixtures, any HVAC replacements, cleaning it, and then handing the keys over to the managers and saying, this unit is ready for moving.
Absolutely. So when, when you're kind of, you're having those late night phone calls, with that guy down in San Antonio, when you're scheduling, when you're making those orders, do you have particular suppliers, or how are you getting these materials to the site?
Yeah, so depending on the area will depend on who we source. So we exclusively use PPG for our paint. We like PPG. If you don't like PPG, I would highly recommend Sherwin-Williams. In most on a house or single family, I would almost recommend them by how many their store footprint is incredible. You can find a Sherwin-Williams in every single city that you go. For our general make-ready supplies, we like to use Home Depot, which they have a Wilmar. They recently purchased and rebranded to Home Depot Pro. They were able to supply us our full kits. And then flooring, we like to partner with a local flooring company, and they provide a turnkey service, which is labor and materials. And that's usually what we do. And then based on the pricing that we can get, we may source individual parts. Like we have a lighting company who we source all of our interior and exterior lighting. And it just really depends on what prices are and what kind of product we want to put in and where we can source it. And then, he learned, basically taught me something that the most important thing is there's something called a price, which is what you pay for the item. And then there's a cost, and that is the cost associated with it. And what that means is getting something turnkey, and turnkey is not having to put in any work, can pay dividends into that scheduling, where you're not having to call your lighting supplier and wonder where your light fixtures are when the rest of your materials are. And so understanding your cost and your price and where you can and where that all pencils in on your budget at the end of the day.
Yeah, absolutely. It almost kind of reminds you of that cliche, just going in and doing it right the first time so you don't have to clean up a second.
Measure twice, cut once.
Yeah. Exactly. No, yeah, so it almost sounds like you kind of have a lot of it is kind of, you have your suppliers, you mentioned PPG, you mentioned, Sherwin-Williams being in every city. But it seems like flooring was probably one of the few things it's kind of local dependent, right?
Yeah, so we like to use local flooring because we like the installers. We like to contract out our flooring installers. And so if you're using a general contractor, they'll obviously source it all for you. But if you're having to do your own flooring, and if you're not, we exclusively use vinyl plank. We found that unless we're going into a class A product, the carpet, the life on the plank, we're usually getting 7 to 8 years. Carpet, we're getting 2 to 3. And we found that day laborers just don't do a good job of laying the floor. And so we are okay paying that premium and getting it done right, to ensure that we're not having callbacks or any issues in the units.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny how you talked about carpet a bit, about that 7 to 8 compared to the 2 to 3 year period, them not putting it in correctly. It kind of seems like, at least to me, you would probably have a better opinion on it than I would, but more and more people are starting to really hate carpet.
Yeah, look, it's great. It's great to wake up to and put your feet on. But you get a pet in there, you're immediately paying about 150, $200 for an odor removal. You have wine stains, just, general staining of the carpet on you, sweat. We just don't like it. And especially in the lower class products where our residents are a lot harder on our units. And if you're not familiar with that term, there's a lot more damage in them. And we found that we're constantly replacing the carpet, while the plank we can't. And when you replace the carpet, you can't exactly just patch like a quarter of the room. you got to do the whole room. If you put the plank in, we can just rip up the pieces that are not good and reinstall.
Yeah, absolutely. You gave some great insight about carpet, about plank. Are there any other ways? Maybe someone's not doing, a larger scale development, but are there any ways to kind of mitigate that potential damage for a unit?
Um, in our class, I mean, it's difficult. There's obviously, I alluded to pets. You cannot allow pets. I mean, outside of that, you run into fair housing rules and regulations and renting to individuals based on what you think. So outside of eliminating pets, it's very difficult to legally, and it's almost illegal to profile, and it is illegal, I'm sorry, to profile an individual and not rent to them because you have an unfounded claim on how they are going to treat the unit.
Yeah, sure. Now, I was more suggesting like, are there any features that you could add, to the unit itself that would prevent further damage?
Oh, yeah. I mean, an easy one is drywall corners. You could put the little plastic corners on each of your corners on your drywall. Outside of that, I mean, we don't really kind of dummy proof them. We haven't found a way to cost effectively do it.
Yeah, fair enough. So, you've talked about deals, or I guess your projects, Little Rock, Nacogdoches, San Antonio, Houston. What is it about Florida and Alabama that are kind of compelling to your company?
Yeah, so we like Florida a lot just because the real estate prices are a lot less. Fort Lauderdale, if you go look at, I mean, Jacksonville, if you go look at any housing report, is like the hottest thing. There's a huge financial institution. You also have the Carolinas as well. They have a large financial institution. And it's just areas that are recently, I mean, you got Denver as well with the new tech surge there. Those are metroplexes that are just now getting high income individuals moving in, and the rents are appreciating accordingly, as well as you're seeing cap rate compression in those markets. And so you're getting on a, if you're not familiar with what a cap rate is, it is essentially, think of it as it's a multiplier that used in transactions. So you'll take essentially your free cash flows and you will divide it by a percent, and to get you what's a hypothetical appraised a value of the community. And cap rates are debatable, but they're in between, individual investors, but they, as a market whole, they're pretty solid.
Okay, fair enough. So I'm assuming you would kind of see different standard cap rates based on different cities, or how would that look?
Yeah, exactly. That's precisely it. Cities and also markets. So like secondary and tertiary markets, if you're familiar with, like, there's a primary market, secondary and tertiary. Primaries will be your Houstons, your Denvers, your Dallases, your New Yorks, your real large metroplexes. Your tertiary or your secondaries will be markets like Little Rock, yeah, maybe Albuquerque, New Mexico, Jacksonville may now be a primary market. And then your tertiaries will be your small towns like your Nacogdoches, your Sulphur Springs, or just smaller, maybe 100,000 or less markets. And so you'll usually see smaller cap rates in the larger markets, and then higher cap rates in your tertiary and secondaries.
Okay, absolutely. So when you kind of said that a lot of things between people relating to the cap rates are kind of debatable, what exactly are they debating?
Yeah, so I mean, when we look at Houston, we're looking at it at like four and a half, maybe a five cap for your Class A product. While a Life Co or someone who may not require returns as high as us may look at it as a three cap. And so if we take some simple math and if you have $1 million in free cash flow, and we're putting it at a four cap, that'll give it a $25 million valuation. If you have a Life Co who will put it at like a three cap, that'll take it at a $33 million valuation. So therefore, they're able to pay for more for the property, with an understanding that they're going to have lower returns on their equity. And that's just what they're comfortable with versus what we may be comfortable on our returns.
Yeah, so it almost sounds like it's kind of contingent upon, the market, what the general cap rates are, and not only that, what kind of the different players in the market are willing to pay.
That is precisely it. It's think of it as, if you're familiar with the stock market, it is your equity risk premium. So they're willing to take a lower premium or a higher premium, and that's going to drive the value.
Yeah, absolutely. So we covered a good amount of Texas, Arkansas, Florida, Alabama. What if you don't mind sharing? What are you currently looking at right now? Are you mostly looking at deals in the Houston area, or what's on your plate?
Yeah, so we're looking at. I have about. We obviously we have the couple under contract in Sulphur Springs and also in Nacogdoches. We're looking at some in like Galveston area. We're looking at other. We have a couple in Houston. We're looking at. We have one out in Arkansas. Another another property out in Arkansas we're looking at. And then I have a list of others I'm trying to work through out in Florida as well. And we're looking at mispriced deals and anything that may need some capital infusions to bring it back up to standards. I mean, that's really what we're looking for. And then also we like to go into markets where you're seeing income appreciation within the market. So individuals are earning more, strong labor. We like to buy properties next to school. Like we look at schools. Good zoning of schools does tremendous things for asset value. And I would highly recommend pulling a school, kind of a school radius, and look and see what public schools are in the area. And so, I mean, those are the things. And then we also like to avoid crime. I mean, no one likes having their car broken into, and it's the quickest way to get a tenant to break a lease. And so those are really what we like to look at.
Yeah, absolutely. Those things are definitely pretty important. Just trying to cover your bases, because it kind of seems like people are saying there are a lot of deals everywhere, which there are, but it's kind of hard to kind of shut out the noise and kind of focus on, really specific markets like you're talking about.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, those are the ones we're looking at. I'm sure there are other markets like Phoenix, Flagstaff area that are super hot right now. Just we can't find a deal there that makes sense from a price standpoint. We're just what other players that are entering the market are willing to accept lower returns than kind of what we're looking for.
Sure, absolutely. I'm also interested as well. I know that obviously we've spoken about different cities. Are you having to deal with the county, like the city municipalities, dealing with paperwork work with them, or are they kind of out of the equation at this point?
Yeah, so I don't work on the development side, but we do have. I mean, we are continuously applying for grant money. Like we had another. We received. It was maybe a month or two ago. We received grant money to build another project down in Houston. It's going to be our third development in Houston out. And so yeah, we deal with them on that standpoint. And then also, I mean, if anyone's familiar with the Houston market, real estate taxes are crazy. I mean, then they are skyrocketing like you could not believe. And so if you were actively involved in protesting them, but outside of that, that's really what we do on the municipality level.
Absolutely. Yeah, you touch on interesting subject there is taxes, because it seems like that's on everyone's mind. You have a property, you hold on to it, and you think, how much am I going to pay in taxes, right?
Yeah, I mean, what we do is we've taken an extremely conservative approach regardless. So you have to look at the reassessment cycle. And so there's some key things to look at is one, how often is the property reassessed? And so like places like Little Rock, Memphis, they're on a 4-year cycle. So if you get the next one's in 2021, and so they'll reassess your appraised value. And the only other way it can go up is if you do rehab on it. But essentially you lock in a value at 2021, and that's your tax rate through 2025. Some of your larger areas like Houston's on a every year reassessment cycle. And so every year you're getting a new taxable value that you're paying on your property. And then the other thing you want to stay and pay attention to is if there's any prepayment discounts. So I think I want to say Jacksonville provides a 4% prepayment discount if you pay your taxes early. And I don't know the exact deadline, but I mean, that's free money. If you, most loans these days are escrowing your real estate taxes. So there's no reason to not take advantage of those opportunities. And I know I am going to shift the subject. The other one I would like to highlight is insurance. If anyone's familiar, I want to say there was 7 or 8 separate billion-dollar disasters last year. And so when you're going for your insurance renewal, be prepared for large increases, especially if you're operating in a coastal area or like Houston or Arkansas. Ironically, they had a huge flood out in California where the wildfires. Oklahoma actually has it's one of the worst states to buy insurance because they have hail, they have tornadoes. I mean, it's just horrible. So I would be very cautious and ensure that you're providing a nice buffer. When we do our taxes, regardless of where the assessment value is, we're penciling in 90 to 100% of our purchase price, even if we're buying an asset that may be at 40 to 50, just so we don't get caught in that crunch. Because you don't want to undershoot that and get caught in a bad way.
Yeah, it definitely sounds important to kind of have that padding, because you want to mitigate as much risk as you can and make sure all your bases are covered.
That it cannot say that enough. I mean, luckily we've been fairly conservative on all our underwriting. We haven't gotten caught. But there are going to be a lot of deals down in Houston that are going to have property tax issues. I mean, we got 40% increases on some of our properties. In San Antonio, we got an 89% increase over the last year. It's insane. And we didn't even pencil in the 89%. I mean, they assessed us at, let's say it's 175% of purchase price. It was just absurd.
Wow. It almost makes you wonder, what's the future going to look like? Is this going to continue, or is this going to stop, or what do you think?
I mean, it's personally, especially with all the stimulus money that just got printed on top of it, you had your government shut down for 2 months. I mean, March, April, there was almost no sales income tax for your municipalities. And so the question is, how the number one way municipalities raise money is sales tax and property taxes. And those are two places where, one, you're going to have a sales tax deficit from cities being closed for 2 months. And on top of it, I wouldn't be surprised if you see delinquencies on your property taxes coming up on this new year, as there's been, we're at 10% unemployment. I mean, there's going to be people who can't pay their taxes. And so our city's going to have budget deficits, most likely. And how are they going to make up that difference? Property taxes is my thought.
Yeah, absolutely. I know we kind of touched on this a little bit last week, kind of talking about how March and April, where exactly is that money, given that you were talking about sales taxes, property taxes. It kind of just seems like the little snowball is snowballing and it's getting larger and it's going downhill. What does this mean for maybe the end of this year and 2021?
Yeah, so I mean, if you have agency debt, if you're not familiar with agency debt, I'm referring to like the government agencies like Freddie Mac, Fannie Mae, HUD. Those programs provided great. They were able to provide great forbearance agreements, and so, and if forbearance, there was 3 months, you get to extend those 3 months payments over the following 12. But then the big question is, I saw it was Tuesday, the executive branch passed legislation through the CDC to extend the eviction moratorium. Now, my thought is we're going to have everyone up in arms and protest it. But if that eviction moratorium passes and there's no rent relief for the landlords or the owners, and they're still not collecting rent. I mean, that 3-month forbearance that was April, May, June, they're still not having income on their property. I mean, how are they going to service their debt? Is the lender going to extend it again and provide some sort of in-house forbearance? Or, I mean, the question is what's going to happen, and I don't have that answer. But it's there. I have concerns, but it's also on the flip side, it's a potential huge buying opportunity for people who have cash on the sideline. And there will be deals that are going into receivership and bankruptcy court and can be bought for cheap. And so if you have cash laying aside, the other thing I would say, and I got this from a guy out of Berkshire, what he's recommending is anytime if you're looking at buying a property, the other big outstanding question is who wins the election. What his recommendation is, and I think it's a fantastic one, is to anytime you put down money, make your earnest money refundable. On top of it, give yourself 90 days to close, and that'll see you through the election, and it'll also see you into Q4 and maybe into Q1. And that will hopefully buy you some insight. And in the middle, you can do all your due diligence, line up the closing, but make sure you have an out because come election time, we don't know what's going to happen. And you don't know if there's going to be any rent forgiveness in the near future where you can't essentially hold your residents to their lease obligation. And so those are kind of what we're looking at. And we have cash on the sideline, and we're hoping some of these deals turn bad for owners, and we'll swoop in and buy them.
Yeah, absolutely. No, you drew out a lot of different scenarios, and it's crazy because there's so many different moving pieces, so many things that can happen here. You kind of talked a bit about the lenders, potentially calling debt, or potentially the lenders, kind of extending that. I don't know exactly how that would look, but it's interesting. And then not to mention the landlords, the tenants. It's interesting to see what will happen.
Yeah, and the people who are going to get slaughtered, quite frankly, are the mom and pop small investors, because the institutional investors will have money to help float those notes. But the smaller operators, I mean, if you got two properties and neither your resident's paying rent, are you going to supplement it out of your paycheck? I mean, and you're going to burn through your savings in a heartbeat, very quickly.
Yeah, it's definitely something tough that unfortunately some people are going to have to deal with. What's the way to kind of see yourself through that? I mean, if you are that mom or pop, how do you kind of get through a potentially tumultuous time in maybe the near future?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing is, everyone may not think their lender's on their side. I mean, your bank does not want to foreclose on your property. They don't want to operate it. Their main goal is to lend money and receive that interest payment, and they are okay with that. They are not looking for crazy returns on asset appreciation. They don't want to operate your property. So I would advise you, if you foresee issues coming up, get on the phone and start those conversations with those lenders, because they can help you out. And luckily, we've been able to not enter forbearance agreements with any of our properties, but individuals who I've spoken to have said their lenders are very receptive and are even potentially extending those payment obligations further because they don't want to take it back. They want to just collect their interest payment and move on.
Yeah, absolutely. It was interesting to see all of this kind of unfolding way back in March when everything was going down, kind of with the stimulus, the forbearance. There were so many different things that were going around. It's just kind of interesting to see this situation kind of continue, and it'll be interesting to see how it plays out.
Yeah, I mean, the CARES Act was put out for 120 days, and the thought was the virus would blow over then, but it didn't. And so now everyone's scrambling and kind of just trying to react with the current market. And there's no crystal ball to know what's going to happen in the future. You just have to make sure that you have cash aside to service your notes. And if you don't, like I said, call your lender and try and see what kind of arrangements you can make.
Yeah, absolutely. So I know that you'd kind of gone through it a little bit, but could you maybe kind of elaborate a bit more on forbearance, kind of, in this context?
Yeah, so forbearance is it's an agreement between you and your lender to delay the payment. So you're deferring it. You're not forgetting about it. All you're doing is you're saying, hey, these payments that are due now, we're gonna let you pay off in the future. And so a standard forbearance agreements is 3 months. So for 3 months, you don't pay your mortgage note, and then over the next 12 months, that 3 months of rent that was kind of deferred is split up into equal payments. So you're paying a quarter of a month extra so it's essentially a 15-month agreement.
Yeah, absolutely. So, what would kind of be the distinction between forbearance and deferment?
And excuse me, deferment.
Yeah, or just
I mean, I don't
deferment.
necessarily see a difference. It's one and the same. I mean, if you're deferring a payment, it's still going to be coming due, and so it's the same as forbearance in that context, where you're just not paying now and you're paying in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. I just thought I'd ask because reading a bit online, people are kind of using it interchangeably. So,
Yeah,
um,
yeah, they can be. I mean, it's a deferral of your payment. Ultimately, is what forbearance is.
yeah, absolutely. So for you, Eric, what's in the future for you? What are you looking forward to doing?
Yeah, so I mean, I like where I'm working. I mean, we have a great program. We have a great mission. I'm a little bit of on the millennial side where I like not only making money for our company, but I like doing good in the world. And so ideally, I hope to work here a long time and continue to grow. And eventually, when I have the experience, I'd like to hopefully go out and start my own. I don't want to start my own with a book of contacts who will provide, investment money, and I'll put up a little bit of equity, and then ideally almost set up a small family office where I can help essentially own my business and run it from there.
Yeah, absolutely. I thought you touched on a pretty cool part there about kind of being a little bit of a millennial, and it's kind of interesting at how what I'm finding is that even reading online, a lot of people are seeming to um, kind of put out that they're working for nonprofits. Like one of my good friends, and one of my friends in Dallas, he is a real estate broker. He has a real estate company, but he's also a big advocate for nonprofits, and he uses real estate kind of as a driving force for those nonprofits.
Yeah, I mean, like, look, if you're successful, I mean, you have a lot of resources and knowledge, and I think it would be a shame if you don't share that with others. I mean, I love teaching personally. And yeah, I think a lot of people who are successful also enjoy teaching and helping other individuals, and nonprofits are a great way as well. You know, Personally, I like making a little more money than what the nonprofits provide. So it's kind of not for me, but I do love to give back in the community in other ways. And hopefully, even one day, I'll have the capital to set up a foundation and provide services through there.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know if you have anything off the top of your head, but what sort of organization would what kind of cause would you like to contribute to?
Yeah, so my big thing is an education gap. I think, I was blessed growing up. I grew up, upper middle class. I was afforded, great schooling. I got in, I was provided college. I got out debt free. And a lot of individuals don't have that. And it starts at the younger age. I mean, you have a lot of single mothers and fathers and parents who are trying to both put food on their table and also educate their kids. They can't pay for tutoring. They can't pay for after school classes. The kids may not have a great environment. They may not have great parenting who teach you how important it is to study and how important it is to develop a good work ethic. I mean, that's my biggest cause is hopefully bridging that gap between the upper middle class and maybe the lower class on the education, because America's the land of opportunity, And while everyone's afforded the same opportunity, they're not afforded the same framework that drives that opportunity. And I'd like to help bridge that. We have social services at our communities where we provide after school tutoring. And I'd hope to be able to expand that one day.
Beautiful. Well said. Well, Eric, is there anything else you haven't said that you really just like to hammer home?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if you're looking on an institutional level or even starting on your own company. Number one thing I would say is if you find something that you're passionate about. I'll refer back to Arkansas. What got me through that is knowing what I was doing and the mission that I had set out. And you're able to overcome any obstacle. The other thing I would say is anytime you're getting down, always find time to try and frame it in a better way. And the last thing I would say is, regardless of the outcome, always celebrate an accomplishment. Whether it's if you close a deal, celebrate it, or even if you work your ass off and more or less you may not get the expected outcome, you still need to take the time to appreciate what you accomplished. And it may not have been what you hoped for, but ensuring you're always keeping that positive mental attitude and attacking things every single day with that will pay dividends in the future.
Well said. That's definitely a message that a lot of people need to hear.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Well, Eric, man, I'm getting tied up. It's been great having you on the show. Maybe someone is, they're inspired by what you're saying. They, obviously you have so much knowledge about the industry. They want to get a hold of you. Where can we find you?
Yeah, if you want to reach out, you can reach out to me via LinkedIn. Eric DeVelasco is my name. Or you can reach out to me on Facebook. You can find me on my website. I'll find my contact information. I'll provide you my personal email. It's the letter E, DeVelasco, my last name. That's D as in David, E, V as in Victor, ELASCO, the number 3 at Gmail. Feel free to drop me an email if you have any questions about the topics we discussed, or would like to pick my brain on anything. I'd love to provide time and assist in any way I possibly can.
Yeah, absolutely, Eric. I'd be happy to put that in the description, as always, for all of our guests on the show. I've really enjoyed this conversation. You kind of ran the gamut and were able to kind of offer us a lot of insight, not only on where you're from and what you do, but also the impact that you're looking to make in the future. So it's been great having you.
I appreciate the opportunity and of coming on your show. I mean, this has been fun. It really has.
Absolutely. Until next time.
Yeah. Take care, y'all.
Thanks a lot.